One of the most anticipated parts of the upcoming spring test realm is a new Gauntlet that's going to be dropping in Wizard101. And if y'all don't know about this, y'all, like last year, same time, when this Gauntlet dropped, it fully shook up the best gear, the PvP meta, it shook up everything. But I wanted to make today's video because I actually think that for the first time ever, new gear might not actually be so easy to make. Now let's talk about what's a little different, right? Right now, Aon Gear gives literally every stat in the game, including pip chance, which it never used to do. When we're comparing it to something like Merciless Gear from last year, when it didn't have pip chance, it was really cool to see new gauntlets and other sources of gear drop, so you could actually fill in that gap with 1 or 2 pieces of gear. This actually happened with the Highland gear a long time ago, right? Let's pretend that Merciless gear was meta. It didn't give pip chance like, it used to. What you would see is, oh, cool, there's a robe that gives 500 more HP, and obviously a ton of pip chance that otherwise you wouldn't get from the Merciless gear. But what happens when gear now gives every single stat that you could possibly want other than shadow pip chance, which is kind of useless? The big thing that changed between when Merciless gear was really good and now when Aon gear is really good is that they did a super big gear audit where they just added pip chance and accuracy and basically filled in the weaknesses of all the gear. And while that did do a lot of really good things for the game, like literally free up your ability to run full Aon gear, which I think is ridiculous. It lets really high pierce schools experience high pierce, and really high damage schools experience much more damage than even the pierce schools. Like, there is a lot of really cool stuff that happens when you have the ability to run full Aon gear, but also, is there even an incentive to go after other gear anymore? And that's a question that I have. When this new Gauntlet drops in spring test realm, I'm not gonna be as hype about it as I was for getting the Highland gear when Merciless was good. Why? Because when you compare, like, essentially the template of gear when it comes to, like, comparing Aon gear with Highland gear, for example, what you notice is, yeah, you get like shad pip chance, but you're losing insane levels of pierce. We're talking 10 pierce. I'm making this video because I think that Wizard101 has officially run into the big issue that I think that they've been trying to avoid for a while, and it's the fact that I don't think they can make gear better. And because there's so little wiggle room for making gear with this complete of a gear template better, I'm kind of skeptical of their ability to even make Gauntlet gear that offers a valid alternative to gear like this. I think that there's a couple of solutions for what I think could be an emerging problem for Wizard101. I think one thing that they should really consider doing, if they're gonna put so many stats like this, is when they change one gear template to another, right? Let's say that we go from Aon gear to new Gauntlet gear. Instead of removing a whole stat and then making it replaced by another stat, which I think is very likely what we're gonna get. Instead of doing that, maybe just take the stats that you see and lower and higher respective ones. So for example, right, damage and pierce, they're very offensively related. Why not have a set that's very close to Aon gear, but it gives more pierce and less damage? Or alternatively, more damage but less pierce, right? I mean, both scenarios would work, and it would make it so that some schools that are much better with high damage compared to pierce, maybe they can lean into that a little bit more. Just off of the fact that fire has elephant and can hit through shields, I would go even further into my pierce because I know that I'm guaranteed an open shot where my pierce will matter a lot. Meanwhile, like a storm or a death or something that's super reliant on damage, maybe they would prefer a low pierce, high damage setup because it complements their playstyle better. So instead of going the route of previous Gauntlet gear, which would theoretically in this scenario, what it would do is, I think it would replace pierce with shad chance. Instead of doing that, I think they could really like make like a scale for, maybe this is like the base, like the most balanced version of damage and resist and health and all of that. And maybe they could just like, alter it a little bit. And I feel like it could add some customizability that we don't have right now. I think the point that I'm making on pierce and damage is something they've already had success with raid gear, right? It gives up damage for pierce, but honestly, it doesn't have to stop at damage and pierce at all. You can do this with accuracy and pip chance, maybe something with lower pip chance, higher accuracy, maybe something with lower resist and higher HP, or higher resist and lower HP. And you could even make it so that resist schools are actually able to have a lot more resist at the expense of more HP, and it could make a lot of things interesting. That's one solution. One solution is to make it so that you exaggerate some stats more than others while keeping the Aon Gear as your balance, so that people feel a need to actually go after this gear. They're not going after lesser gear. The other solution is, if, let's say they're stubborn about this and they don't want to take that idea and they want to instead just replace stats from template to template, if they were to do that, then you would need to make the stat that's missing from Aon Gear much more valuable. And what stat is that? You guys have seen me mention it multiple times today already. Shadow chance. Right now, this 80 pip shad rating, like you would think it's kind of low because I'm running Aon Gear and Aon Gear does not give shad rating. And by the way, neither does my wand, meaning I'm not running anything that gives me shad rating. You would think if I go against someone with more shad rating that I would be able to get shads less. So maybe all my crazy pierce and damage comes at the expense of me not being able to use my shads as easily. While you would think that's the case, unfortunately, that seems to not be how shadow gauges and shadow rating works in this game at all. Yes, over a large number of games, if you run lower shad rating and you go against someone with higher shad rating consistently, you will gain shads less over time. You will. But honestly, with how much damage and pierce it is, that one little round where you might get a shad or not, it doesn't matter as much. In one round, you're still sitting on as much damage. So really, the whole shadow gauge, shadow rating thing, it kind of breaks down a lot. Not to mention the sheer number of times I've seen someone with less shad rating literally outshad their opponent. This stat is very janky right now. I would argue that this needs to be reworked because right now, there is simply no incentive to run shad rating on your gear. I think it would be very interesting to see the same dynamic that you sometimes see with Arch Mastery, right? Like, let's say someone is running Arch Mastery. I'm running a deck that gives me Arch Mastery. When I PvP against someone that doesn't have this much Arch Mastery, I see them gain less school pips compared to me. I see that every single time. Why not use the same system they used for this on Shadow Pip rating? Why is it that this rating is so weirdly random compared to this? I just don't get it. Maybe the randomness is less, and which is why I feel like Arch Mastery does better. I think, honestly, the Arch Mastery system was rolled out way better in terms of the rating than Shadow Pip rating by a landslide. Shadow Pip rating should matter, especially if you're giving up extremely important stats like Pierce for it. All in all, my preconceived notions about where they're going with gear might be completely misplaced, and I'm fully willing to acknowledge that. If their goal with Gauntlet gear isn't to go the Highland route, then maybe we will see some really customizable options for every wizard. But if it's simply giving up one stat for another, I feel like we might run into an issue where the Aon Gear template might be the only good one for anyone to get anytime an update drops. Let me know what you guys would want the Gauntlet gear to look like. There's tons of things I didn't talk about, like item cards, like pins, like that kind of stuff. Let me know what you guys think they should do to make Gauntlet gear something that you would actually consider farming for, especially given how good Aon Gear is. I would love to hear y'all's opinions in the comments, bro. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave us something for new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something. I'll see y'all soon. Stay awesome, y'all. And yeah.